Hi, this is Wanda from Sam Design, and today we're going to be making this tiny heart alpha bracelet, and we're going to be using the flat alpha technique and the straight edge technique. Also, we have triangle starts and ends, and our heart is going to be centered. We're going to be making the pink and blue one, not the purple and pink. Purple and pink will be in another tutorial, so we're getting started with the pink now. So I picked the colors red and white for Valentine's Day, red for the background and white for the heart itself. We have 8 strings actually, and you can just measure the length you want your ties to be, then measure around your arm and add everything up and leave like 1 extra inch. That's what I usually do. But if you have a bracelet that's your exact size, you can just like measure from the tie all the way down to the second tie and then leave 2 inches extra. So just pinch there and then move back 2 inches just so that you can be sure. And then whatever length you get from this, take that to be your average length of your alpha bracelets. So now that you've cut the strings you want, that's our 8 strings, cut an extra string, that will be our 9th string, but cut this as maybe like 30 inches, 25, or as long as you possibly can, because that will be our leading string, which we'll be using to make the bracelets. I forgot to attach mine to the knot, so I'm just going to tape that under and I'll leave a little space so that it will be the same length with my ties when I'm knotting. Now to start, I'm going to make a forward backward knot. Now you don't have to do this because I forgot to add mine. I'm just going to pull it out, so it's going to be a little loose. Then make the second half, which is the backward knot or the backward part. And we have started our alpha bracelet. And we're making a triangle start, so just in case you don't know. Now divide our strings into two. That's 4 on the left and 4 on the right. We're starting with the one on the left. We're going to make a backward forward knot. Now that we're done with the left, we're going to the right and we're going to make a forward backward knot. Now remember I said we're using the straight edge technique, which is what's going on at the edges. Now remove 1 from the bunch on the right, leaving only 3 there. Going to the left, remove 1 string from that bunch too. So we have 3 on each side and 2 in the middle. Starting with the bunch, we're going to make a forward backward knot, forward now backward knot. Now we're going to make 2 backward knots. That's 1 backward knot on each of the strings in the middle. So now we're going to be doing the left edge, which would be a forward backward knot. We've completed our second row. So we're going to remove 1 from the bunch on the left, then go all the way to the right and remove 1 string from that bunch, leaving 2 strings in the bunches on each side and 4 strings in the middle. So starting with the left, we're going to make a forward backward knot. Sorry, a backward forward knot. We're going to make a backward forward knot. Then we're going to make 4 forward knots. So now we're going to be making 4 forward knots. That's 1 forward knot on each of the 4 strings in the middle. And now we're going to be making 1 forward backward knot on the edge on the right. On the edge of the right. And this is our second to the last row. So now we're going to open up the bunches on each side. That's why we're removing 1 string from each side. And we have 1 string on each side and 6 in the middle. So with the edge, we're going to make a forward backward knot. Then we're going to have 6 backward knots. Now this row is the end of our triangle start, but it's also the beginning of our actual bracelet, because you could have made a loop, but I decided not to. So instead of making the loop, I'm making a triangle start. You can make a triangle and a loop, by the way. I just decided not to. well, because this one is easier and more beginner friendly. Now that we are at the edge, we are going to be making a backward forward knot, and then to begin our other row, which is our first normal row minus this one. So if you have a bracelet, just check this. So if you have a bracelet that's your size, you can just measure from one end to the middle, so you know how many rows you need to make. I'm going to be making 30 rows because the triangle start already pushes my bracelet a little bit towards the middle, and this is it. I made 29 rows here, but I'm going to be making 30 rows on the red one instead, because I want it to be just exactly in the middle, not a little off at all. So I'm going to start counting from now. From the rows I make now. That's when I'm going to start counting my 30 from. So now remember, they go from left to right and right to left. So we're going to make our backward forward knots, and then our 6 forward knots on the right. We're going to be making our forward and backward knots. Yeah, forward backward knots. Oh, we're at the end, almost at the end of this row actually. So our forward backward knot, and then to begin our next row, another forward backward knot. And then we start with 6 backward knots actually on the 6 strings in the middle. Now we're going to be making our backward forward knot on the edge or the left. And so far we've made 2 rows out of our 30, remaining 28. And I will get back to you when I'm about to swap my string, or when the string's already short and I want to change it to a longer one. Here I am a few rows down and my string is short, so I'm going to be showing you how I do this. You can choose to tape your string down. I'm not going to do that. So I'm taking the next string and I'm going to make half of a backward knot. Could be a forward knot. I'm just making a backward knot in this row, that's why. Then take the one that is short and pass it through to the other side. And then use the current leading string and make the second half of the backward knot. Like that. Now we're going to do this again, just so we secure our string. Make the first half of a backward knot, in my case. Then take your string, but instead pass it under the other string, so it's going to the back, and complete. And then repeat. Just continue going without that string. And you can see that there's no, if there's a bump, pull the short string, it will just flatten out. So we've gotten to the part where we're going to be making our heart. Now I'm just going to divide my string. So on the left I'm going to put 4 strings, on the right I'm going to put 2, and then 2 was left in the middle. So starting with our red string, we're going to first make 2 red knots. And since it's on edge, it will be a forward backward knot and then a backward knot on the second string. Now I've shown you how to introduce strings, so that's what we're going to be doing. But this is going to be with a little twist. So we're only going to make 2 knots of white. So I'm going to show you what I'm going to be doing. So I will first switch to my white string. I do that by making the first half of a backward knot, then passing the red string through that knot, like just over towards the left, and I'm going to pass it under that other red string, under my other string, and then pull up. So it goes towards the 4 strings I put on the left. Now you understand why later. Now I'm going to complete making my white knots. I still have to make 1 more white knot. Then after that, I'm going to show you. Now you can see that the red string is already in position, so we're just going to use it to make the half of we're just going to switch colors very easily because it was there, and then pass the white string under all those 3 strings and out, because we're not going to use it for this row again. So we're going to make 4 knots. We've already made 1, so just remaining 3 more. And on the edge, remember to make your full backward forward knot, which is now. We're done with this row, and to start the next row, we're going to take 3 strings here, and then 4 white strings and 1 red string on the right. So starting again with that red string, we're going to make a backward forward knot, then 2 forward knots with the red string. So now we're going to bring back our white string because we are going to be making 4 knots in white. So we are going to change strings now, pass it through and under the remaining 3 strings and all the way towards the right. So it's beside the last white string. Now we're going to complete our first knot, and then we'll make our 3 forward knots. Now we are not going to be using the flat alpha technique because we are on the edge of the bracelet. We're just going to take this white and move it to one side and bring our red string, then move the white under it. So they're not going to mix or anything, and we're not going to pass it through the knot either. We're just going to move it aside, and we'll make the red string on the edge, which will be a forward backward knot. Now to begin the next row, we're going to make another forward backward knot. Then we're going to count 5 strings, or just remove 2 on the left, because we're going to have 5 white knots. So we swap colors out here and complete our white, and then make 4 backward knots of white. So now we're going to go back to the red color, and we're going to swap it out with the flat alpha technique now. So we'll make 1 half of the red, pass the white through and under the remaining string, moving it out of the way, then using the red and completing the knot. Then we'll make our final knot, which will be a backward forward knot on the edge of this row. Now for the next row, we're going to start again with a backward forward knot, and we're only going to have 1 red knot this time. Count 5 strings, or just remove 2. We're going to be making 5 white knots. So bringing in our white string, we are going to swap it out complete the first knot and then make 4 forward knots with the white string. That's for individual forward knots. Now we just bring our red string back and we're going to make 2 knots of red. So swap out the string, pass it through and under the last one and out of the way, then complete the knot and then a forward backward knot. Now for the next row we're going to make another forward backward knot, but this time we're going to go in reverse. So we're going to count 5 knots, or just remove 2 on the left, introduce our white string and make 5 white knots. Now going towards the edge of the left, we're going to make 2 red knots, which mean bringing back our red string, passing the white through and under the other side and moving it out of the way, then completing our first knot and making our second one, which is a backward forward knot. Now for this next row we're going to have 3 red knots at the beginning, so our backward forward knots and then two forward knots. We have 4 white knots, so as usual we're going to bring back our white string and then we'll swap out our red string and use our white string to make 4 forward knots. Now this is just a tip. If you're making alpha bracelets and you have like color switches, better for you to count them before you start, so you know how many how many knots you're supposed to make with what color. And we finally have our end. As usual, we're not going to make any flat alpha technique since it is on the edge of the bracelet. We're just going to swap them out, and if you're confused about this, check out another tutorial, so I'm not going to go in depth in here. And we're going to make our final knot for this row. Starting the next one, we are going to take 2 strings because we have 2 knots of red here. That will be a forward backward knot and then 1 backward knot with the red string. And now we're going to take 2 strings. The next 2 strings are going to be made with the white knot. This will be the last row we're going to be using the white string for. And we can say goodbye to our white string as we make from 3 backward knots and 1 backward forward knot. So I'm just going to do this once. I usually would pass the white string through the red knots twice, but I feel like it's secure enough so it doesn't have to go a second time. And we're just going to continue making plain rows. So we're just going to make a knot of red and then 6 knots of red, and on the edge we're going to make another, maybe a backward forward or a forward backward knot. We're just going to continue making knots from left to right, right to left. We're going to make 30 rows of those knots, and I'll meet you back when we're going to start our triangle end. When I'm making my triangle end, I'm going to be starting on the right, which means my string is going to be ending on the right. Just in case I wasn't clear, I'm not going to show you how I make the 30 rows again, since I showed you that in the beginning. So I'm just going to jump right into the end. This is where we are now, and you can see the background has changed. Ignore that, just focus on what I'm trying to do. So we're going to take 2 strings on the right and then 2 strings on the left, leaving 4 strings in the middle. Now starting with the right, we're going to make a forward backward knot. So my forward backward knot, and then we're going to make 4 backward knots on each string. That will be 4 backward knots on the strings in the middle. Knots on the edge over those 2 strings at once, which will be a backward forward knot. A backward forward knot. Remove that to the string if you have one sticking out. Now we're going to add 1 string to each bunch. So I'm going to make 1 here. That's 3 in that bunch, and on the right we're going to add 1 there, which will make that one 3 too. So we have 3 on the sides and 2 in the middle. Now on the left, which is where we stopped, we're going to start again by making another backward forward knot, and then 2 forward knots, and now we're going to make 1 forward backward knot. Forward backward knot, like that. Now for the final row, we're going to divide those 2 strings in the middle. So 1 will go to the left, 1 will go to the right. So we have 4 4 on each side, like 4 and 4 on the right. So we're going to make, on the right we're going to make our forward backward knots, and on the left we are going to make a backward forward knot. Please ignore the sounds in the background. A backward forward knot, and just to make sure our triangle end is, well, triangle like, we're going to make 1 forward backward knot over all these strings, and There we have it. We are done. We're just going to make our ties now, and then we'll remove all the strings that are sticking out on our background. So for I'm making twisted ties, I'm just going to divide my strings into two, twist two halves in like twist two halves towards the left, then I will twist both of them against each other towards the right this time. So twist individually towards the left, then twist against each other towards the right.